Okay, so I have had this for a few weeks now, and I have been making some pens just off camera and trying to get myself up to speed. I've watched a lot of videos and these are kind of the results that I'm getting. So it's quite a nice and easy kit. A lot of the blanks that I kind of use are just stuff that I had around already. The Scholar pen turning kit does come with 2 wood and 2 acrylic with the necessary pen kits with it. And I'm not really a fan of the acrylic, so this is just going to be a wood only video. So let's jump straight into actually how I make the pen turning kits. Now, the only 2 tools I use is the lathe and a pull saw and maybe a mallet and a punch if things go wrong. So get your blank, get your packet here, empty it all out. Keep this bag, this will come in a little bit for later on and I'll show you why. Your 2 brass pieces here, you're going to use just to line up of this how much you actually need. Okay, no fancy tools going on here. We're using an IKEA pencil and a square made in a shed. So let's do that for overall length. Cut that down in the middle. Okay, so I do things just a tiny bit different here. One thing I did notice with a lot of pen turning is that it's very rare to actually see somebody use a tailstock chuck and actually drill out the center of these pen blanks. In fact, I haven't seen anybody do that. So let's jump over to the lathe and I'll kind of show you what I mean. Okay, so this is what I mean. I like to drill my pen blanks on my actual lathe. And I'm using a center drill. Now these are typically used on metalworking lathes. I am typically more prone to use a metal lathe. And this is kind of why I wanted to try it. Now, I don't know what Chinese lathes actually, you know, the center point accuracy is like. So what that means is how accurate the point from the headstock to the tailstock is. But I know that mine is pretty good. And there's not a lot of stick out. My lathe is variable speed, so I'm just going to take this kind of nice and slow here. Okay, so I've just kind of nibbed into the center point there that you can see, and I'm just going to go quite slow speed here. And what this center drill does is exactly what the name implies, which is it drills in the center. And it's just going to be a nice kind of start to that drill. If we turn off the lathe now, we'll move this out of the way, and you'll see here that we're in a nice even point just at the end there. Okay, so the bag that we held onto earlier is what we're going to be mixing our 5-minute epoxy on, and I'm just using Arrow dye onto these. And before we do that, we're just going to get some 80 grit sandpaper. Okay, what you want to do with your little blob on the end is just put it in the top there. Make sure it twists all round. Give it a bit of a dance. Just insert on the top, and I push mine in just ever so slightly, so we're going to trim the actual blank down nice and square. If you do get a little bit inside of the bore there, the trimming tool, the top piece is actually designed to just scrape away any excess. So that kind of reams the inside of the brass hole. Okay, so now we have these 2 blanks all glued up together, and we're just going to leave these for a little bit of time. Top tip here, don't do what I did and a little bit got on the side and I put these together. Just put these separated apart for 5 minutes and come back to it in a little bit of time. And just whilst we're waiting for that to dry and set, we're going to set up the lathe for the pen mandrel itself. Now, I don't know if I mentioned earlier, but these are actually made by Axminster, in Axminster, which is quite nice. And you've got a solid fixed rotating drive at the top that goes into the headstock, and the other one goes into the truck itself. Now, I did mention earlier that my lathe is a Morse Taper 1, and there is a little bit of a downside to that. With these, you have to put quite a large amount of force to actually clamp the pen blanks onto the mandrel itself, and it's very difficult to, it can be, to remove them out of your tailstock. So what you tend to do, I've got a push bar that I use and that I just made up, and this slides into the back of your tailstock here to actually push it out. But because these walls are so thin, I'm assuming to take into consideration, you know, cheaper lathes, that this bar has to fit into the center here. So there's quite a lot of clearance, and the problem with that is that whilst you're trying to use this push bar at the back, you haven't got a lot of material to actually knock this out. And I'm a bit concerned, it hasn't happened yet, that this is going to start to mushroom over. Can you see there? But it's just something to keep in mind of. If I was to buy another lathe, I'd probably try and get a Morse Taper 2. You wouldn't have that problem because you're going to have a much bigger wall size. So the setup of these is super duper easy. You're going to take off these spacing rings here, and you're going to go spacer, wood, spacer, wood, spacer, and then these end points here. And what these obviously do is you're going to turn the wood down to these. So they are a consumable to a degree. You know, these will eventually wear down, etc. But you can make these, you know, if you need to. But to be honest, they're pennies to buy, so it's, yeah. Typically for my procedure is I just set up the sharpening jig. This is a Anchor Designs chisel jig that I've recently made, and it's set up for doing spindle gouges as well as your more exotic grinds, so your fingernail style grinds and Irish grinds, that type of thing. But for this video, we're just going to be using my cheap and cheerful spindle gouge. This has seen much better days, but it's just kind of a nice size for pen turning. I'm not going to be doing anything exotic with grooves and fancy balls and things like that on there. I'm just going to be showing, you know, the basics of pen turning and how I do it. So nothing exotic with this. I just set this up in the jig. I lock these down and I rotate it round after. This does need a little bit of a dressing, but it's okay for now. And if you are interested in one of these, then here is my email address, and I'll be putting these up on my eBay account. Okay, so it's been a little bit of time now. Now what we're going to use is the barrel trimming tool. And all this does is go in the top here, and it's just going to take off the top, and you want to go just until you see the shiny brass part. Okay, here's the two blanks set up on the Mandrel kit, and let's start the royalty-free music and start the montage. Okay, that's the kind of the finish that we've got there. So we've just gone up to 400 grit and we've sanded within the grain direction, and that is looking really, really nice there. So what we're going to do next is just use some cut and polish on here, and I'm just using these napkins that you can buy. I get a good enough finish for what I'm wanting to achieve here, and then we'll finally finish off with a bry wax beeswax polish. So this is before the final beeswax on there, but it really does pop that grain out. Looks great. Then the next part, what I do is I just use a mallet. You know, I'm not using anything fancy here. I just use a rubber mallet just to knock in those points there. I know you can get fancy pressers, and I'll probably make one, but so far so good doing it this way. Just take your time with it, hit it squarely, and that line there, the indentation that you've got, is your target. So, you know,
there we go. I haven't damaged anything or anything scary. And at this stage you can just check. Yeah, it retracts. Lovely. Middle piece pushes on. I try and line up the grain where I can. So, like so. And then you can, just like that. It's always a bit tight. And there we have it. Our fancy twisty slimline pen.
and there's a nice little close-up here of what we've been doing. And that's going to be a wrap for this episode, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. The Axminster kit is working great for me. Definitely recommend it to anybody who's interested in pen kits. Just to give you a rough idea, from drilling, starting and everything, it's probably 10-15 minutes to actually make a pen. And for someone like me who's got quite a busy job, it's quite nice to come back in the evening and just have a 15-minute, quite a rewarding little project like this. Plus, if I keep making them, then Christmas is going to be quite cheap this year. So another big factor. So if you did like this video, then please hit subscribe to see more. If you did like the video, of course, please do give me one of those likes. Yeah, stick around for some upcoming projects. I hope you like the content that you see. If you've got any questions, please do leave a comment. And we'll see you in the next one. Thank you. I wonder if you guys would like a video on some of these that I've just had made. Can you tell what they are? See you in the next one.